Rami Khouri is a distinguished public policy fellow at the American University of Beirut, and he joins me now from New York. Hello, Rami. Week in, week out, we've seen these protests with thousands of people there. How significant would you say they are at this stage, and why is the pressure seemingly not making any difference to Israeli leadership, most notably, of course, Netanyahu?
Israel is a very complex internal society, partly because of its makeup. Israel is made up of immigrants who came from all over the world to join a small Jewish community that lived there historically. But there are all kinds of different people, different identities, religious, secular, professional, all kinds of different views and priorities. And that's one factor, which means there isn't really a central focus to a lot of these protests. They evolve a little bit from time to time. The focus has been in recent months on getting the hostages out of Gaza. That was the main cry. Before that, it was the opposition to the Netanyahu government's judicial reform plan, where the government essentially wanted to take over the political system completely and not have any oversight by the judiciary over the legislature. So there's different reasons for this. And then, of course, they're in the middle of a war. And in the middle of a war, it's difficult to really challenge the government very much. But at the same time, there's huge opposition to Netanyahu, partly because of his personal corruption, and he's indicted and he should be standing a trial, and partly because people think he hasn't done very well in Gaza. He hasn't really achieved the aims that he wants. And then you've got issues now like the genocide decision, the International Court of Justice saying there's plausible genocide that Israel has done. And this has really blackened Israel's name all over the world and created huge demonstrations against Israel and for a ceasefire. And the last thing that has happened is the exchange of fire with Iran. And this has helped Netanyahu, not hurt him. All the other things have hurt him, but this has helped him. And he has regained a little bit of the support that he had lost. He's still trailing the opposition of Benny Gantz. If the election were held today, the coalition that Benny Gantz has, center-right, would win. But they would not win by as much as they would have won, a month or two ago. And Netanyahu's own approval ratings are increasing a little bit. They're up to around 37%. So he's really he's in a moment of change, but this change is partly temporary because of the war and partly because of the Iran situation. And it depends really how this turns out. If they do a move now in southern Gaza and Rafah and something happens that the majority of Israelis like, it might help them and it might not. There's also other, ideological differences. You have a big demand that the Orthodox Jews, who are now exempt from serving in the armed forces, many of the demonstrators think they should serve in the armed forces. And this is creating tensions within the various coalitions. So it's hard to say if the demonstrations are really going to create a serious political change or not, because there's so many different factors and they move. Some of them keep moving and changing. And there's actually one more new one that just happened a few days ago. The United States now is on the verge of sanctioning an Israeli army unit because of its behavior in the West Bank, killing and injuring and harassing Palestinians, using American weapons. And the United States is Israel's biggest supporter and, its lifeline. So if the U.S. is going to start sanctioning some army units in Israel, this is again going to create big sources of tension within the government, within society. And so all of these things have to be looked at together, really. You can't separate one from the other.
Yes, and Rami, on that decision, the U.S. decision to sanction this quite notorious Israeli army battalion, the Netzer Yehuda battalion, for, as you say, alleged human rights abuses against Palestinians in the West Bank. For context, for our viewers, this battalion has been the heart of several controversies in the last few years. I wondered what you made of it.
Well, this is common. There's a lot of action by settlers who are independent citizens mostly, but they're directly protected and supported by the army and the police in the West Bank. And when they go around to burn villages or burn cars or shoot people, cut down olive trees, all the terrible things
I mean, I guess I wondered what you made of the US decision to sanction essentially part of the Israeli army.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is that this is the tip of the iceberg, really. So this is a very dramatic move for the United States to do this. And it shows you how much pressure has been brought on the U.S. government internally with all the demonstrations and things inside the United States, but also from around the world, because it's become so blatant what Israel is doing in Gaza, what Israel is doing in the West Bank. So the Biden felt he had to make some kind of gesture. It's very a small gesture. It's very limited. It may or may not have long-term implications, but it's significant because it's so dramatic coming from the United States, which is the biggest supporter for Israel. And as we saw in the situation with the Iranians recently, massive American military support helped the Israelis deflect most of the Iranian attacks, and also the massive support just with another bill that was passed in the Congress today to give Israel billions and billions of dollars and armaments for the attacks on Gaza. So it's very potentially really dramatic, and I think we should see it as a sign of the U.S. trying to pressure Netanyahu in one of the few ways that they can, because Netanyahu doesn't always take pressure very well, and he can often ignore the United States. And so these things are all happening at the same time. But what they tell us is Israel is in a great state of flux. It's changing in many ways. It's having a lot of problems in Gaza. It's having a lot of problems around the world. Now it's facing court cases all over the world, and in national courts as well as UN courts. So it's a country that is in stress, and it's surrounded by people who are willing to fight with it, Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and the Saudullah and Yemen. So this is Israel is a very stressed out country. It has always depended on its military force, but it's realizing that military force alone will not achieve the goal that it wants, which is to live in peace in the Middle East and be accepted. And people won't accept it if it's mainly using military force to occupy and subjugate and kill Palestinians and other Arabs.
Yes, I suppose the point you're making there is that Israel likely to come out of this conflict a very different country to the one it went into it as. You mentioned the US package today, a $24 billion package of military support for Israel. Some 37 Liberal Democrats opposed it, 366 voted in favour. I just wondered what your take was. How representative is that of the US sentiment towards Israel, in particular with the US providing Israel with so much military assistance, which is, of course, enabling it to continue fighting in Gaza?
It's very representative, but it's also very limited. So what you're getting now, this has been going on for about 3, 4, 5 years, and it was really Bernie Sanders who started this process, and others joined, progressive Democratic members of the Congress and others. You started to get people who would not automatically give Israel anything it wants, to the point where a few years ago when Netanyahu came to speak in Congress, something like 60 or 70 members of Congress refused to go just as a protest. So this is a small number of congressmen and women and senators who are saying that they do not accept the United States to support and enable the genocide that Israel is involved with. And they don't want to stop helping Israel at all, because they know that if the U.S. Stops helping Israel, it'll probably collapse. But or use its nuclear weapons, one or the other. But what they're doing is finding the ways where they can express their opposition to the current Israeli government. And they're putting a lot of pressure on Biden as well at the electoral level. This is an incredible new development in the U.S., where places like Michigan and Pennsylvania and Virginia and Arizona, and other states where the win by Biden was not huge over Trump last time, And there's a big population of Arab Americans and Muslim Americans, Black Americans, a coalition of people traditionally in the Democratic Party who are telling Biden, we're not going to vote for you if you continue doing what you're doing in Gaza.
Absolutely. And so significant, as you say, in an election year. Rami Khouri, I'm afraid we're out of time. I could continue talking to you for ages. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme today. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.